Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, and I do apologize for being 22 minutes late. It's my bad. I usually air this show from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't, hence the name Nature of Reality Radio. Sorry I'm out of breath. I had to run to get here. Didn't realize that I scheduled this show at 4. I see Semir in the queue here. Semir Osmanagich is the guest today. We will be talking about the Bosnian Pyramid. Semir, I do apologize. I will do the news on the fly as quickly as possible here to make sure I can get you on as soon as possible. So first, for no longer than 5 minutes, I will do the news courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. First article, photos. Michelle O. School lunches among worst in world. Spanish schools serve shrimp, whereas U.S. schools serve expletive. Yes, no surprise there. You can imagine that America would have some of the worst lunches ever. Well, what do you expect? It's America. We're one of the fattest nations in the world. No surprise there. And, well, let's move on to the next article here. California City Council approves armored SWAT ambulance despite protests. What do you need an ambulance for? In a tank? Are we expecting to go to war? Yes, why would an ambulance need to be... Someone is calling me on my phone. Hang on a second. I think it might... Hang on a second, folks. Hello? Yeah, is this Semir? Is this Semir Osmanagich? Okay, I can't talk, sir. I'm doing a radio show right now. I'm going to have to talk to you later. Yes, I am. I cannot talk to you, sir. I'm hosting a show. You're going to have to call me back later. All right, call me in 2 hours. Bye. Yeah, sorry about that, folks. All right, I was saying California City Council approves armored SWAT ambulance despite protests. What do you need an ambulance for? In a tank? Are we expecting to go to war? Yeah, I can't imagine why you would need a SWAT ambulance. Next article, PETA kills 88% of pets in its care. Dogs, cats typically killed within 24 hours and dumped into trash bags. Oh, the hypocrisy. I thought PETA was supposed to be about the ethical treatment of animals. Well, apparently not. All right, next article. Moussaoui says Saudis funded Al-Qaeda, says nothing about U.S. role in creating terror group. The U.S. government continues to support Al-Qaeda, and it's spawned to this day. Yes, the plot has always been move Al-Qaeda into a country, the U.S. government controls Al-Qaeda, say we need to invade that country to save the country from Al-Qaeda, never telling anyone that they're the ones controlling it, and then they use the invading of Al-Qaeda to justify invading that country, and that is how they rule that country. People need to wake up to the fact that Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which for all practical purposes are one and the same, are just used by the governments as a plot to rule the world. All right, next article, terror expert. Fox News is literally working for ISIS. The network's slammed for hosting uncensored Jordanian plot execution video. Yes, of course, Fox News is working with ISIS. The same people that control the U.S. government control Fox News, therefore, and the rest of the mainstream media, so it shouldn't come as an astonishment that Fox News is literally working for ISIS. Next article, violent cop arrested after handcuffing and choking child causing brain damage. Punched another child in the face for cutting in lunch line. Wow, what is with cops nowadays? We've got to do what we can to stop police brutality. Our next article, former NSA and CIA head. After 9/11, U.S. Constitution is a movable feast. Hayden admits surveillance purposely targets ordinary Americans. Yes, Hayden, the guy who was running the NSA after 9/11. The NSA surveillance system, they used 9/11 to justify it. 9/11 was an inside job. Therefore, the NSA surveillance system is unjustified. All right, one last article here. Vaccination agenda used by Democrats to divide Republicans. Efforts to execute libertarian and individual liberty factions. Yes, the Democrats and Republicans are both funded by the same special interest, the same New World Order special interest controlled and funded by them. But they do duke it out by gangs, and you can be sure that some things that, like vaccinations and such, will be used by certain groups to demonize and divide other groups. It's disgusting, isn't it? All right, that's the end of the news, and now I'm going to get Semir on. Semir, area code 661, is that you? Are you on the air?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I do apologize. I completely forgot that I scheduled this show at 4 o'clock. I had to run here just to start the show. But, hey, even though the live feed of this show will stop at 6 p.m. Eastern, I can still give you the full 2 hours. We could go until 6:25 my time. Can you do that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I do apologize. Okay, so starting with the Bosnian pyramids, I guess I might as well give you the floor to talk about the subject of the Bosnian pyramids here. How did you get into that? Tell us your life story with that, and what have you found, and what do you see for the future of that? You've got the floor on this subject.
Thank you. Andrew, I'm an anthropology professor, and I teach archaeology and megalithic sites at the American University in Bosnia. Also, I've been researching the pyramids and ancient civilizations for the last 25 years. My PhD is in Mayan studies. I'm also a member of the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, Archaeological Society from Alexandria, Egypt, and I've written 15 books on the subject of pyramids and ancient civilizations. I've seen most of the archaeological sites in the world on all continents. Well, after 25 years of pyramid research, in April of 2005, 10 years ago, I first came to the little Bosnian town called Visoko, in the heart of Bosnia, 20 miles northwest from the capital city of Sarajevo. I came to see the local museum, but what really caught my attention was a hill, as they called it, with 4 sides, triangular faces. And I took a compass, and compass showed me that those 4 sides perfectly match cardinal points, east, west, north, and south. And even though this hill was covered, and still is, most of it, with the soil and vegetation, I immediately knew that it was not a natural hill, but the artificial structure which has been covered by soil after thousands of years. So, in the last 10 years, we started archaeological dig, sample testing, lab analysis, radiocarbon dating, and we have spent over 360,000 hours doing that. So the Bosnian Pyramid Project has become the most active archaeological site in the world. Every year, hundreds of volunteers, dozens of experts from different fields work with us in our sites in Visoko. And we've been on major TV media, National Geographic, History Channel, Discovery Science. In 2006, we were breaking news on CNN, then BBC, and most of other media from the world. Now, this discovery of the Bosnian pyramids brings 7 elements that will forever change our view of the ancient history. Number 1, these are the first pyramids in Europe. Number 2, the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is the largest, the biggest pyramid on the planet. As you all know, the Great Pyramid of Egypt is over 470 feet in height, but the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is over 720 feet. Number 3, the orientation to the north of the Bosnian pyramids is the most precise on the planet. Most of the pyramids, like Egyptian, Old Chinese, Cahokia pyramids in the US, most of the Peruvian and Mexican, they are oriented to the north. So far, we thought that the best orientation is the northern side of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, with the error of 0 degrees and 2 minutes. However, according to the Bosnian State Institute of Geodesy, the error from the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is 0 degrees, 0 minutes, and only 12 seconds. The next element, the element number 4, below the layers of soil, approximately 3 to 4 feet, we've been discovering huge blocks, some of them rectangular or square in shape. We've analyzed them at 7 different institutes for materials in Italy, France, Czech Republic, and Bosnia, and they all told us the same thing. It was so-called geopolymer concrete, artificially made concrete. And this concrete is much better quality than what we can make today. Our concretes today in 21st century are in the range from 10 to 60 megapascals when it comes to the hardness. And the concrete on Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is going up to 134 megapascals. Never in human history such good quality concrete blocks were made like those that cover the largest pyramid complex in the world. The element number 5, the age of the pyramid. In the last few years, we've been discovering an organic material. For example, in 2013, we discovered fossilized leaves below 2 layers of concrete blocks, meaning that those leaves were brought by the wind during the construction phase. When we did radiocarbon dating to determine the age, what we got from the test lab was 29,200 years, plus minus 400 years. And this is radiocarbon date, meaning that the calendar date is 15% more. So this pyramid is approximately 34,000 years old, and it makes it the oldest pyramid on the planet. The element number 6, below, as we call it, the Bosnian Valley of the Pyramids, there is the most extensive network of underground tunnels. They run for tens of miles. And the element number 7, in those tunnels, we've been finding huge blocks. We've analyzed them, and we were told that they were ceramic blocks, artificially made. Some of those blocks, 1 ton, 4 tons, 8 tons, which is 18,000 pounds, or tens of tons. And they are witnessing the very advanced technology of the ancient builders. So, with those 7 elements, we can claim that the history books will never be the same.
Thanks, Semir. There's a couple of things I would like to address here. By the way, I'm hearing an echo in the background. I'll just try to work through that. But you said that the Bosnian pyramids, they're the largest pyramid on Earth, even bigger than the Great Pyramid. Well, I know the Great Pyramid in Egypt is definitely not the largest pyramid in the world, but I was under the impression that the Bosnian pyramids are not the largest pyramid either. There is a pyramid in Mexico known as the Cholula Pyramid, which on an episode of Ancient Aliens, Giorgio Tsoukalos said is actually the largest pyramid in the world. Is he mistaken? And if he is, could you please give us the evidence that shows that the Bosnian pyramids are actually the largest and not the Cholula Pyramid in Mexico?
There are tens of thousands of pyramids in the state of Mexico. Over 90% of them are still covered by soil and vegetation. Well, that's the case of the Cholula Pyramid, which is in the town of Puebla, in the city of Puebla. And you are right. This pyramid is actually the largest pyramid on Mexican soil. Before, we thought that the largest one was the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan. However, the height of this pyramid is rather inferior. It is below 200 feet. Now, most of this pyramid is still covered by soil and vegetation. In the second quarter of the 16th century, when Hernan Cortez, the Spanish conqueror, came on Mexico's soil and he conquered Aztecs, when he came to Cholula on his way to today's Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, he found a beautiful city and he wrote the letter to the Spanish king, and he said that he found the most beautiful city outside of the Spanish Empire with the 400 pyramids. He decided to own all of them and to build churches. Well, today we don't have only about 80 churches and they are in very bad shape. But he also said that in the middle of the city there was a hill, and on the top of the hill he installed a huge cross with the idea to build a huge cathedral there. It did happen a few decades later, and the beginning of the 20th century, when workers were digging, they wanted to build a hospital at the foothill of this hill. They discovered below the layers of soil huge blocks. And a few decades later, they realized that yes, that was the largest pyramid in Mexico. But when it comes to the quantity of material used in Bosnia and Cholula, Bosnia is superior. The Great Pyramid of Egypt, 5 million tons of materials. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, 18 million tons of material. Now, what we consider now the real height of the Sun Pyramid in Bosnia is about 722 feet. However, on most of the topographic maps, we can see that actually the size is probably much bigger, maybe even 2 times bigger than this, but not determined the beginning of the foundation yet. We've done several series of geological core drilling, but we have not hit the foundation. So probably even this number, 722 feet, is not the final number. Most probably it's about 1,300 feet.
Okay, and one more thing I want to question you about. You said that the Bosnian pyramids, they are 34,000 years old, making them the oldest pyramid in the world. Well, when it comes to dating pyramids, there's a lot of misinformation going on. I mean, mainstream archaeology and mainstream history and mainstream science all tell us that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was built around like 2,500 BC, 2,500, 3,000 BC during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. But we all know that's a bunch of horse pucky. I mean, it's obviously a joke. For one, Ravne Tunnel had talked about how the Great Pyramids and things, they would line up with the stars of Orion and the constellation of Leo, and talked about how it can't be a coincidence. They were built around 10,500 BC, but some people would assert that even Ravne Tunnel is wrong about that dating. Andrew Bartzis, a Akashic Records reader and my personal favorite source of information on my show, said that the pyramids in Egypt were actually built, get this, 803,000 years ago. Now, that's jumping way off into the deep end, but some people would say, well, there's nothing unusual about that. Over the course of time, the pyramids were renovated, and they were actually used for many different purposes, and that's why there's so many different theories as to why the pyramids were used. But the realization that the Great Pyramid was built long before anybody in the mainstream or even some of the alternative people are saying, how can you be sure that the Bosnian Pyramid is 34,000 years old, and now that I've told you about the Great Pyramid being built over 800,000 years ago, are you willing to change your mind about your claim that the Bosnian Pyramid is the oldest pyramid in the world?
The science is based on scientific arguments. At this point, the most reliable source of the age is radiocarbon dating. We know that it is still plus minus 10%, maybe even 20%. But still, we've done about 18 different radiocarbon dating when it comes to the Bosnian pyramids and underground tunnel network, and all dates are taking us in a time between 21 and 34,000 years. When it comes to the Egyptian pyramids and the pyramids in general, what I can say is that almost everything they teach us about the ancient history is wrong. The origin of man, civilizations, and pyramids. The pyramids in the history books, according to the mainstream archaeologists, are built in Egypt and Mexico. And that's wrong. They are built all over our planet. We know that there are 250 pyramids in China, in the central Chinese province of Shanxi. I wrote a book about them. We know that there are 300 pyramids in Peru. There are tens of thousands of pyramids in Central America, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Belize. There are 200 pyramids, so-called Cahokia mounds. But they are actually pyramids, artificial structures in the state of Illinois. There are 155 in Egypt, 234 in Iran, former Nubian kingdom, tens of pyramids on Canary Islands, the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Now, of course, there is a new discovery of the Indonesian pyramids, according to my friend over there. The age is about 24,000 years. There are pyramids in Australia and other places. So no wonder that they are in southern Europe as well, France, Greece, Bosnia. Now, when it comes to the Akashic records, I did an experiment with the 6 Akashic record readers, and I asked them a lot of questions about the pyramids and different archaeological sites. What I can say, I was not getting the same answers like you would expect if they are reading the same book, the same encyclopedia. Instead, I was getting the answers, the information that they were kind of a part of the big picture. But the interesting thing is, the biggest error, the biggest difference they were making was exactly about the age. For example, I was asking about the age of Machu Picchu, the famous site in eastern Peru. And as you know, all the history books are talking about the Machu Picchu as the royal retreat for Incas from the 12th to 14th century. Well, from 6 Akashic record readers, I was getting 6 different dates. Some of them are talking about medieval times, Incas, some of them 2,000, some of them 5,000, 50,000, 300,000 years. So I would say when it comes to Akashic record and the reading, I think that the weak point is the age. I don't know how they get this number of 800,000 or 900,000 years for the Egyptian pyramids, but what I do know, is based on science, is the following. Mainstream science claims that the Egyptian pyramids are 4,620 years, the oldest one, the Djoser, the Step Pyramid in Saqqara, and about 4,560 years, the Cheops, Khufu, or Great Pyramid. Then a couple of decades later, pharaohs built the second largest Khafre, the third largest Mycerium, and so on and so forth. Interesting thing is that the Egyptologists have been saying this for 200 years without a single proof, because we don't find mummies in Egyptian pyramids. We don't find hieroglyphic writings, no symbols, no organic material, no tools. So the time will show that the statements by Egyptologists, archaeologists for the last 2 centuries about the age and the builders of Egyptian pyramids was probably the biggest hoax in human history. What do we know, and it is based on science when it comes to age of Egyptian pyramids? Well, you go to the Giza Plateau where the pyramids are, and you can see a lot of shells from the Mediterranean Sea. Now, Mediterranean is 300 miles to the north, so obviously this area was flooded. The last time the Giza Plateau was flooded was about 12,000 years, or 10,000 BC. So, it is a logical conclusion that the pyramids were already there when we had the end of the last ice age. Secondly, when the Turkish and the Ottoman Empire came to the area, when they opened the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Egypt, they found salt and they found shells. It seems when they did radiocarbon dating that the shells were over 12,000 years, but this is the information which has not been released by the mainstream Egyptologists. So, I would say that over the next couple of decades, we will be getting the real age of the oldest pyramids on the planet. And the Bosnian, if not the oldest, are among the oldest, for sure. Egyptian also. And in China, interesting thing is that among 250 pyramids, there are 20 of them that are huge, built from superior materials, sandstone blocks and granite blocks, and they are the oldest ones. And then you have a series of smaller pyramids built by very concrete Chinese emperors, from the Emperor Qin, 2,300 years ago, and then to the emperors 1,000 years ago. So it seems that Chinese civilization already found pyramids built there. They wanted to make replica, but they did not have technology or knowledge. So they built their pyramids, very small in size, from the mud bricks, inferior material. The same thing in Egypt. The biggest ones were already there before the end of the last ice age. When the Egyptian pharaohs built their civilization, they tried to build replica also from the mud bricks, which is, by the way, the construction material they use today. And those pyramids are long gone because they were inferior. It tells us another important conclusion, that one, the knowledge has been brought. The question is from where? And the second conclusion, there is no evolutionary process as they teach us in schools. What they tell us is that 10,000 years ago, we were primitive, caveman level, and today in 21st century, we are the smartest, technologically most advanced, the most intelligent, and the most beautiful. They are teaching us wrong because we are not. The history of mankind and the history of this planet in general is the history of the civilizational cycles, one after another. Civilizations, they reach their peaks, and then huge global catastrophes happen. Everybody's wiped on the face of the planet, and then the second civilization had to start from the beginning, and that's been happening to us. Our civilization started 8,000 to 10,000 years ago with Sumer, Babylon, Akkad, Assyria, ancient Egypt, ancient India, but this is only the last civilization cycle. Before we had at least 4 or 5 of them, and we're going to have them in the future. When the next global catastrophe hits us, less than 1% of us will survive. And at the time, they will think that they are the first one, the most intelligent, and the most beautiful.
Thanks, and I'd like to digress for just a moment here, get off subject to discuss what can we do to solve the problem of improper dating, because there is no question there is a conspiracy by the powers that be to hide our true history, and among other things, that means concealing the dates that certain things actually happened, and this one notable example of this has to do with dating things. I remember seeing a documentary where on YouTube in which an individual was talking about how he and his daughter went to a museum, and his daughter asked the tour guide, "Can you please tell us how you date the fossils?" And the guy said, "Well, my dear, we date the fossils by the age of the rock layers that those fossils are in." And then about half an hour later, the same daughter asked the same tour guide, "Could you please tell us how you date the rock layers?" And the tour guide said, "Well, my dear, we date the rock layers by the age of the fossils that are in those rock layers." And it didn't take long for the young girl to realize, wait a minute, this does not make any sense. And then she told the man, "Okay, is this supposed to be a joke? You realize what you just told me about how you date fossils and rocks is totally contradictory and makes no sense." And the tour guide acknowledged, "I know what I just said doesn't make any sense, but I have no choice but to say that, because if I don't say that, then I will lose my job." And there's nothing unusual with people losing their jobs because they try to expose the fact that our history is flawed. One notable example of this is there's a documentary on the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel. Actually, it's not UFO TV Studios anymore, it's just UFO TV, where it's called A New History of Early Man. It talks about how 250,000 years ago, there were humans in North America, which was long before mainstream science and archaeology tells us. And the scientists who agreed with that there were humans 250,000 years ago in North America, they all lost their jobs, and the only people that didn't lose their jobs were the people that still go along with the bullcrap lies that mainstream science pushes about dating and all that, and notable examples like this. So I guess my question for you, Semir, is what do you suggest we do in order to put a stop to this conspiracy to hide the truth about human history? Do you have any ideas or suggestions?
We need to change the societies and the way they are structured. We live in a society right now in the 21st century where we have elites who have a monopoly of knowledge. And from this monopoly, they got all other monopoles, political, corporations, media, financial, and others. And then, on the other hand, we have people, it's a majority of 99%, who have to work 1 or 2 jobs a day so they can pay the bills, mortgages, loans. As long as we have such organization, as long as we don't realize that we are not only materialistic beings, but we should live in harmony with our spiritual aspect and with spiritual senses, we should be able to get all the knowledge that we need from different dimensions, including Akashic realms. So, what we need is actually a revolution, because what we have now, we have a society which is based on fear. Fear to lose the job, fear of physical death, fear to, lose the house, cars, and material stuff. But then, in science, again, we need scientific arguments. We know that one of the pharaohs ordered that the list of all pharaohs and all rulers of ancient Egypt to be made. And it was made. And the history of ancient Egypt is not 5,000 years when the first dynasty started, but 34,000 years. But they are talking about gods, semi-gods, and sons of gods. Sons of gods are pharaohs who would rule for a couple of decades. Semi-gods would rule hundreds of years, and gods, thousands of years. So it should tell us another thing, that we have someone other than human who probably borrowed the genetic material to humans in order to build or maintain structures like pyramids. And then we are coming to the next interesting question. What was the purpose of pyramids? They're telling us they are tombs of pharaohs. And as I said, and as we know, there are no mummies in pyramids. People very often connect, let's say, the King Tut, Tutankhamun, with the pyramids. But actually, his body was discovered 200 miles to the south, in the Valley of Kings, under the mountain, Stone Mountain, having nothing to do with the pyramids. Not a single famous pharaoh was buried in the pyramid. The question is, what was their real purpose? Well, you see, in our case, in Bosnia, the first 5-6 years of our project, 2005 to 2010, we devoted showing that we do have constructions. We have shape of the pyramid, perfect orientation, triangular faces, concrete blocks, underground tunnels. Somebody built a complex of at least 5 pyramids, which we named the pyramids of the Sun, Moon, Dragon, Earth, and Love. Interestingly enough, 3 main pyramids, Sun, Moon, Dragon, when we connect their tops, are giving us perfect equilateral triangle. The distance between the tops of 1.4 miles, roughly, or 2,180 meters to be precise. So, we spent 5 years proving, yes, somebody built this huge complex. Now, we don't want to spend another 100 years trying to convince everyone that we have pyramids in Bosnia, because we know that mainstream science will not accept this fact for another 20 or 50 years. We had to move on. We had to prove what is the purpose of pyramids. And for that, Egyptologists, archaeologists, geologists could not help us. Nobody teaches them in schools about the true purpose of pyramids. We needed support from the experts in energy phenomena, the physicists, electrical engineers, sound engineers, people with the instruments, people who can confirm their scientific results. So, in 2010, we had physicists from Zagreb, Slobodan Mizrak, who came with his 10-member team with equipment to measure electromagnetism. First, they went on the nearby hills, no anomalies. But when they came to the very top of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, there, in the radius of 13 feet, they detected and measured an electromagnetic field of 28 kilohertz frequency. They got out of this radius, no measurement. They went back in, the measurement was there. It meant that this electromagnetism does not go left or right, but it goes up as the energy beam, electromagnetic beam. The following year, we had 3 more teams confirming this measurement. Electrical engineer from Serbia, Belgrade, Goran Marjanovic confirmed that, 28.4 kilohertz with his instruments. Then sound engineer Heikki Savolainen from Finland confirmed it. And then finally, anthropologist from Italy, Paolo De Bertolis, confirmed that. When in science you have 4 different scientific teams who come at different times with their own equipment, and they all got the same result, it is called international independent scientific verification of the phenomena. Which phenomena? Well, the energy beam going through the top of the pyramid of the Sun, which is electromagnetic in nature, the frequency of 28 kilohertz, which is focused and which is continuous. Mother Nature does not make beams like this one here. You have to have artificial source. You have to have a machine. So our conclusion was the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is not only the biggest and the oldest pyramid on the planet, but the oldest energy machine that has been working continuously for 34,000 years, being the first perpetual motion machine on the planet. So now we are coming to a completely different aspect of this discovery. So it's not only archaeology, but it has become the interdisciplinary scientific project. We've been using satellite screening, geophysical methods, we've been using scientists from different disciplines, and we've been proving that really in the distant past we had much more advanced civilization than ours. And then we did another thing. We measured another energy phenomenon, ultrasound. Now, ultrasound is something that we cannot hear. What we do hear is a sound. And we hear from 10 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Everything about 20 kilohertz is called ultrasound. For example, animals can hear ultrasound. Well, on the top of the Sun Pyramid, we measured the ultrasound beam, again, 28 kilohertz frequency. And that frequency was continuous, and we've been measuring during the winter and summer and spring and fall. So, this is the energy machine that generates several different energy phenomena. And then we wanted to find out, where is the source of this energy? I mean, the pyramid cannot make energy from nothing. And then we realized that according to 3 labs from Zagreb, Croatia, Belgrade, Serbia, and Vienna, Austria, that the energy source of the pyramid was a huge iron plate, or iron ore, 2,440 meters, or approximately 1.4 miles below the pyramid. Why iron? Because iron generates its own electromagnetic field. What the pyramid does, it sucks this energy, amplifying it. And then to the very top, it sends the focused energy to the universe. How do we know that the pyramids amplify the energy? Well, 2 of our Russian colleagues, geophysicists, Dr. Oleg Havroshkin and Dr. Vladislav Siplakov, have been measuring the strength of the signal in the case of pyramids in Egypt and Bosnia, at the bottom of the pyramid and at the top. The conclusion, at the top, at least in case of Bosnia, the strength was 50 times stronger. So something is happening inside the pyramid. and we know what. There is a network of tunnels inside the pyramid on 7 different levels, and they are laid out as a spiral. So this energy is coming from under the pyramid, underground, going through this spiral network of tunnels, and going to the very top. So obviously the ancients were so ingenious. They knew our planet better than us. They knew the energy sources. Now, the story does not end here. Electromagnetism is just the first source of the energy. The second one is magnetism. Of course, there is a natural magnetism all around our planet. The third one, a lot of underground water flows under the Bosnian Valley of the Pyramids. When you have 2 underground rivers at different depths, in between them, the electricity is generated, and the physicists know that. And the fourth measurable energy phenomenon, when the water moves, it releases negative ions. So, someone in the past was smart enough to realize that there is a huge energy point here in the heart of Bosnia, and they built the most powerful geometrical shape, the shape of the pyramid, the energy amplifier, and they made an energy machine that's been working for so long. And that's not all. We measure the strength of the signal on the top of the pyramid, then 10 feet higher, and another 10 feet higher. Every time we lifted this sonda, the signal was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And now the physicists could not believe. They said, well, if the source of the energy is inside the pyramid or below the pyramid, then this energy beam should be getting weaker and weaker as it moves away from the pyramid. This is how our technology works, and it is called Hertzian technology. But since everything is upside down in this little country of Bosnia, our pyramids work differently. You move away, the signal is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So let's call this non-Hertzian technology. In 21st century, we don't have technology which is based on non-Hertzian waves. However, the guy who was born only 200 miles to the west from here was experimenting in his lab in Colorado Springs in 1899 and 1900 with non-Hertzian technology. And his name was Nikola Tesla. Tesla invented a transformer with which he was able to send energy beams wirelessly from one end of his lab to another one, 55 feet away. And he was able to light up the light bulbs, even if they were burned. And just before they are going to burn down his lab, because he was becoming a threat to the mainstream science of his time, 120 years ago, he did a last experiment. He sent this energy signal to the ionosphere around our planet, wirelessly. And this energy being deflected, coming back to the planet much stronger. And he lit up 10,000 homes in Colorado Springs. So for the first time, one scientist from our civilization cycle was able to prove, number one, that clean energy was possible. Number two, that unlimited quantities of energy were possible. Number three, that the wireless transportation of the energy was possible. Number four, that non-Hertzian phenomenon was possible. And finally, number five, that free energy was possible. Have American corporations of his time accepted this invention? Of course not. How will J.P. Morgan, who was the biggest donor for his work, sell the free energy and make money? Instead, he cut funding for Nikola Tesla, and he started with his colleagues, rich people, investing in hydro, thermal, nowadays nuclear power plants. building very expensive transformers, cables, and during the transportation we lose 20 to 50% of the energy, so they can sell it to us, end users, for a lot of money. And this is what we call profit economy. And if you go back to the beginning of your question, the profit economy is based for the elite organizations in our society. But the day will come when the free energy will be available to all of us. And that will be the first pillar of the free society. And the second pillar will be the free flow of knowledge. And based on those two pillars, we will have a society of free women and free men. Amen.
Well, I do hope you're right on that one, and I know we are on a positive timeline, so I'm sure that will happen, hopefully in the not-too-distant future. But one thing I do want to discuss is the location of the Bosnian pyramids relative to some other work that other people have done. Anyone familiar with the work of Richard C. Hoagland would be familiar with torsion field physics, and specifically the 19.5 latitude on planets is a very big hot spot of energy. That's where the Great Pyramids are, at 19.5 latitude, and also on the planet Jupiter, the Great Red Spot is at 19.5 latitude. And there's also the whole idea of ley lines, in which towns, or in some cases structures, can all be put on a straight line that they call a ley line, which, among other things, has been shown to be a line of energy on the Earth's energy grid. And, of course, Richard Hoagland's work with torsion field would also tie in some ways to the Earth's energy grid. So in regards to geographic location of the Bosnian pyramids and how they may tie into either ley lines and or torsion field physics, can you touch on that, please?
19 degrees Egypt, and according to some researchers, the same thing with the Venus and Mars, and maybe some other planet in our solar system. However, we would need independent verifications of those hypotheses. But Egyptian pyramids are today in a desert. They are visible. But if you go north, let's say to China, approximately 30 to 45 degrees, we have over 250 pyramids. In Bosnia, 43, almost 44 degrees. In Mexico, it's the same pyramid belt. So the majority of the pyramids are actually not more south, like Egypt or Peru, but they are in the countries like China, Bosnia, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. But another interesting question is, why the pyramids were built? Now, I touched a little bit on that, talking about this energy beam. So if you have an energy beam, which is getting stronger and stronger as it moves away from the pyramid, there is a possibility that it goes through the ionosphere, that it goes through our solar system, and this energy beam could hit actually any other solar system in our galaxy, establishing an energy bridge. If you have energy bridge between two planets, then you have possibility to move frequencies, to move information. And then the pyramid becomes a very powerful communication device. The next very interesting thing is, if you build several pyramids in the area with a lot of earthquakes, instead of one big earthquake, which could bring catastrophe, you would get a series of smaller ones, so they could stabilize the region. The next possible thing for the purpose of pyramids, the pyramid producing pyramid energy, that is the energy going off the pyramid on the surface, could affect in beneficial way agriculture. The healing aspect is very interesting, and I will talk much more about it a little bit later. But then the pyramid energy, yes, it affects our human bodies in very beneficial ways. And then finally, you see the society that we live in it's based on violence. In the last 8,000 years, we've had over 15,000 wars. If there is a civilization watching us from space, they would say, well, we are a very violent society. Look at our demography. 150 years ago, it was 1.5 billion of us. Now it is over 7 billion of us. In order to get resources, we've been getting the plants and animals out of this planet. I mean, it's 50% of all the plants and animals are gone forever. So it seems that we are some type of the virus which is totally uncontrollable. So we are not there yet. We have not understood that we have to live in harmony with the Mother Nature. Why did the ancients call our planet Mother? Because it was our mother. The sun. The sun is our father. We have forgotten those premises, those basic things. Well, the pyramids is there to build the greatest systems. The ancients knew that by building all those pyramids, they were getting the best possible energy fields. How do I know that? You see, everything on our planet has a frequency. And our planet also, until 1990, the frequency of our planet was 7.83. In science, it is called Schumann resonance. 100 years ago, Tesla said that our planet was resonating probably about 8 hertz. 50 years ago, von Schumann said it is exactly 7.83. All the animals, plants, and humans resonate at 7.83. And for us humans, this is the best frequency for our mental, physical abilities. It was like that until 1990. And then, of course, we started with the HEART project. We started with the laptops and computers and cell phones, emitting huge quantities of bad electromagnetism to the ionosphere. And from the ionosphere, there is direct effect on the resonance of our planet. By 1994, the resonance went from 7.83 to 8.4, steadily rising every year. 2012, 14.5, 2013, 15.1. And this is very bad. The higher this low frequency, it's more pressure to us. How do we know that? Well, there is direct link, direct connection between the frequency of our planet and our brain, because our thought process generates brain waves. And when we have this frequency hitting our brain, we feel it as a stress. Now, 40 years ago, I remember when I was very young, we were much more relaxed, no outside pressure, much more smile on our faces. Today, 24 hours a day, we have this pressure, we have stress. We live in a stressful society. But imagine this, you come to the Bosnian underground tunnels, you take your scientific instruments and you measure the frequency of 7.83 hertz. You go outside, over 15 hertz. 2 worlds. You go on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun and the Moon and the Dragon and the Vratnica Tumulus, everywhere 7.83 hertz. We can visitors from Brazil and Peru, New Zealand, Australia, India, Pakistan, Canada, US, all European countries. When they sit in our tunnels, they say, we feel like we are at home. And they are right. They are at home because they are in the best energy field. So one of the pyramid purposes was to maintain the best energy field for all the living creatures on our planet. Now, you did mention also Robert Bouvard. Of course, I'm aware of his book from 1990s, which was very popular, his bestseller, about 3 Egyptian pyramids, and having the same layout as the 3 stars from the Orion Belt. However, no matter which date you use, 2,000, 5,000, 10,500, or 50,000 years, when you put those three pyramids, Cheops, Khafre, and Mycerium, and those three stars from Orion belt, one pyramid will always be a little bit off. So, an explorer called Andrew Collins found a better fit, the three Sigma stars. But I don't think that the prime reason to build the pyramids was just to make the same layout like 3 stars or 5 or 10 stars on the night sky. Maybe it was a secondary or tertiary, but not the main reason. The main reason was the pyramid purpose, which had to do with the energy aspects, and they work on different levels.
Well, since you mentioned that, I would like to bring up that in my private session with George Kavassilis, I brought that issue up with him because he said that the pyramids were of the layout of Orion, and he said that they were put on the Earth to anchor the male energy from the constellation of Orion to Earth, because Orion is the male energy dominant area of the cosmos, and by putting the pyramids down, you could anchor the male energy to the Earth. And I told George Kavassilis about how what Andrew Collins said about how they really lay out the constellation of Cygnus the Swan, and I also told him about how Lisa Renee has said that the pyramids in Egypt were actually designed to represent the 3 stars in the Sirius star system. I asked George Kavassilis, can you confirm that they were to represent Orion? And you know what he told me? He told me, I know, because in one of my past lives, I was part of the group of entities that brought the pyramids and everything to planet Earth to lay them out on the Earth in the form of the constellation of Orion to anchor the male energy of Orion. And he also said that he remembers in that sarcophagus in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, he said that he remembered lying in that thing, and the elements earth, fire, air, and water, the 4 elements, each side of the Great Pyramid represented those elements. And when you were lying in the sarcophagus, you would feel those 4 energies, and then the combination of the energies would go out the capstone at the top of the pyramid. He said, I did that, and I remember doing that, but then he also acknowledged, I can certainly understand how other people like Andrew Collins and Lisa Renee, based on their research, would come up with other ideas, and he said I could certainly be open to the possibility that over the course of time, people could come up with other uses for the pyramid. Like, Christopher Dunn's talk about how you pour hydrodized zinc and also hydrochloric acid solution down the shafts, and they would convert into hydrogen and make the pyramid a power plant. And there's also the Pyramid Code documentary where Carmen Bulcher was the producer of that. She was on my show, as a matter of fact, and I discussed this with her about how the pyramids were like shining beacons of light that would harness the energies of the Nile, which were a lot closer to the pyramids, and they'd shine like beacons. And there were some other purposes that people have talked about. So yes, I understand what you're talking about when people say that there are other uses for the pyramids and how they could represent different things. But to hear George say without the flinching of an eye that I remember doing it in the past life, I know what they were for because I did that and I remember doing that. Well, I see no reason not to believe him simply because his body language and tone of voice said he was being honest. But aside from what the purposes of the pyramids were, one question I do have about the time period of the Bosnian pyramid, you said around 34,000 years ago. That would coincide with the existence of Atlantis. The fall of Atlantis was around 13,000 years ago when we had a galactic alignment in the summer solstice, just like how in December 2012 we had a galactic alignment in the winter solstice. But 13,000 years ago was on the summer solstice. There was the end of the Ice Age and the fall of Atlantis happened. Are you perhaps open to the possibility that the people of Atlantis were in some way, shape, or form connected to the Bosnian pyramids?
Well, I'm a scientist, but I'm not a traditional scientist. And of course, I'm open for all different options until we scientifically prove what's really happening. People that you mentioned, of course, I know most of them. Carmen Balter, she was in Visoko in Bosnia 2 years ago. She's very knowledgeable about the pyramids, and I think that she did understand what we have here. Krizan was here shortly. George is a very nice man. But then again, what we do here, we have scientific project, but we are open for spiritual, energy, healing, and all other aspects. Because when you bring instruments and you measure and you independently do 4 or 5 times what you have, then you cannot argue with that. And I really like this benefit that I have, that we actually run the project. And most other researchers, unfortunately, have to go to different sites, to Egypt, to Mexico, and other countries. They need to get permission. In most cases, they don't get the permission. And they do stuff, paying the soldiers, the policemen to look the other way so they can do some measurements. And this is very unfortunate. You go to Egypt, let's say, right now, you can see in the front and the back of the Sphinx that Egyptians, they've been excavating there. And a few years back, I talked to the Giza director, and I asked him, what did you find so far? And he told me, well, it is confidential. Gosh, why is it confidential? The knowledge, the cultural heritage belongs to all of us, people. So what we did in Bosnia was totally different. Instead of having this Bosnian Pyramid project as the elite project, we said no elites here. We are open for everyone. From day one, we have given the opportunity, even to non-professionals, to come to work with us, to volunteer. And there are no secrets. They can go to the tunnels. They have access to all our analysis, radiocarbon dating. We publish everything on our website. And that's another thing why some of the conventional scientists do not like us. They would like to hide information. Remember a few years back, the girl was working in Middle America, the Mayan site. She discovered a thing which was 2,000 years older than what the orthodoxy was saying. She published that. They fired her from the project. They fired her from the university. They told her you will never be able to find a job as the archaeologist in the U.S. The same thing was happening here in Bosnia. In 2006, when we started the excavation, the Bosnian archaeologists, geologists, they were writing petition to the Bosnian government to stop the project. They said we should not dig. Well, if you have a pyramid covered by soil, the only way to find out what is below the soil is to dig. They were afraid of that. Well, we started digging. We were finding those blocks, rectangular or square, and they are man-made concrete. So we have proven our case. But, conventional science does not like that. The Bosnian archaeologists got in touch with the European Archaeological Association, which was run by the Dr. Anthony Harding from UK at the time. Then they organized a second petition, which was signed by American, German, French, English archaeologists. They were asking again Bosnian government to stop this hoax, as they were saying. Well, their petition was rejected. And then they asked all European archaeologists to boycott the project in Bosnia. They were saying it is pseudoscience, it's pseudo-archaeology, it's pseudo-history. Well, guess what? All their projects in Egypt, in Mexico, in China, it's pseudo-archaeology, it's pseudoscience, because they are closed for other sciences. They want to fit those sites to the mainstream history. In Mexico, Teotihuacan, the city of pyramids, 3 big pyramids, Sun, Moon, Quetzalcoatl, 600 smaller pyramid buildings. Every book says it was built 2,200 years ago by Teotihuacanos. Well, when Aztecs came in the 13th century at this site, they found a deserted place. And they named it Teotihuacan, which means the place where people became gods. So they didn't know the real name. They didn't know who built it. So what the mainstream scientists did, they used this name, they made up a culture, Teotihuacanos, and they made up the date, 2,200 years ago, and they made up a period, a duration, how long they needed to build the city, 150 years, without a single proof. And this is the history that we learn in history books and in schools. That's a shame. And then again, we are coming back to your question, how to date, and, well, we have to be open. When we date our stuff, what we do, we send out organic materials to 2 or 3 different labs. For example, when we find the first pieces of organic material in underground tunnels, with which we could get the age of the tunnels, we send 3 organic materials to Poland, to Polish lab in Gliwice, to Germany, in Kiel, and to United Kingdom, Oxford. We did not tell them that we sent those 3 samples. We got the first results from Germany. They said 32,000 years. The second results from Poland. They said 34,000 years. We never gotten results from the United Kingdom, from England. We contacted the lab. They answered, oh, they are having some problems with the equipment. We contacted them again a few weeks later. They said it was not an organic material. And then we sent them the documentation. They said, hey, these are the pictures of organic material, which we cut in 6 pieces, 2 pieces for each lab. These are the results from Germany. These are the results from Poland. And you are telling us this is not an organic material? What was happening there? As you know, elites, they originate in United Kingdom. They are the ones who have been writing human history for the last few centuries. Because if you control the history, you control the present. And they knew that if they confirmed that the Bosnian underground tunnels are 34,000 years, they will confirm that the history was wrong. They did not want to do that. Well, after that I said, I will never use your services again, because you are not about the science, you are about bad politics.
Well, you made a wise decision to go away from the mainstream, and I only hope other people will do the same. But just so you know, we have about maybe 50 minutes left on the show. I'd like to switch gears now and move to stuff involving the Mayan civilization, because you've done a lot of stuff on that. One thing that's very interesting is your claim that the Maya and others are descended from Atlanteans who came from the Pleiades. Now, I don't think it's an accident that there is a star in the Pleiades star system, the Seven Sisters it's also called, which is called Maya. And some people have asserted that the consciousness of the Mayan civilization has its origins in the Maya star system. Literally, extraterrestrial entities from the Maya star system are the ones responsible for the Mayan civilization to some extent. So with that being said, do you subscribe to that idea that, the Mayans have their origins in the Pleiades and specifically from that Maya star?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned something that it can be found on Wikipedia. They claim that I said that Mayans, they are from Atlanteans, and before that from Pleiades. As a matter of fact, I've never written that. What I did when I was preparing my PhD, of course, I was reading a lot of books, and then I was quoting a lot of different researchers. And that was a quote from the 19th century, a French explorer, and now they're saying that this is what I said. But there was a reason why I quoted him. I think there is a mystery when it comes to the Mayan knowledge about the astronomy, about math, about the planets. Unfortunately, only 5 books, so-called Mayan codexes, still survive. We officially know about them. There is one in Madrid, one in Paris, one in New York. There is, of course, one in Czech Republic. So from those 5 books, even though they're about 25 pages each, we know that they were very knowledgeable about all our planets. They were very knowledgeable about our galaxy, about our solar system. They knew that our solar system was moving within our galaxy, that it takes almost 26,000 years for one cycle. and that we did figure out only in the 20th century using the computers and the telescopes after several decades. So it tells us that they had the knowledge coming from somewhere. And then, of course, there is a Bonampak, a site in Mexico, among the Mexican Indian in the reservoir. And that's the only place that shows the pictures of the Mayans in daily life. And interestingly enough, in the corners of the ceilings, they have something what they call the semi-gods. It seems that somebody was observing them, somebody was watching them, somebody was maybe even giving them knowledge. And then there are some sources that are telling us that Maya claimed that the mission on this planet is their 7th mission. And when they complete it, they will move on. So I would say still a lot of mysteries around the Mayan civilization. It's very unfortunate that they literally disappeared in the 10th century, and most of their buildings, cities, temples, pyramids stopped with the construction. And then it took a few hundred years until tribes from the northern Mexico came to the area. And when Spanish came in the 16th century, they asked those tribes who built those cities. They answered, we don't know. They asked them when. They said they didn't know. And as a matter of fact, even the name Maya is something that is probably not the correct name to that civilization, which left our realm over 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, and it's been said by some that the reason the Mayans all of a suddenly disappeared, like without a trace, and it actually seemed like they disappeared because you could see like pottery and all that, and like things that were in the process of being made, and then all of a sudden that they were no longer making it anymore because they seemed to just vanish off the face of the earth. Some people assert that the reason the Mayans vanished is because they had a consciousness shift and they ascended, for lack of a better phrase, they ascended into a higher realm or dimension of consciousness. Do you think there might be some truth to that idea?
I think it is possible. But then again, as a researcher, I was doing some investigation, and then I realized that the people appeared about 300 plus miles to the north at the same time, the 10th century. And their name is Anasazis, the Anasazi civilization, which was living in 4 southern U.S. states of New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona. Now, they spent about 350 years in those places. The most famous place is, of course, something that we can call the capital of Anasazi, which is called Pueblo Bonito, the beautiful village, in Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. Now, this is an interesting case because this is not a group with a slow evolutionary process. They appeared at certain level and they built over 1,000 villages, a beautiful architecture, 3-4-story buildings, only one entrance. And you would enter those rooms to the ceiling. Pueblo Bonito, for example, had 700 apartments, all the same size, which tells us that their social organization was different. They did not have big kings or religious persons, leaders who would have a huge residences. But they were thinking differently, very spiritual beings. And then they disappeared in the 14th century without a trace. They left all their villages in a radius of 1,000 miles at the same time. How do they communicate? And they thought they will be back because they left some of their clothing over there, but they were never back. They left their place before the Spaniards came, before they brought so much injustice to this region. And I found out that there was the same haplogroup, the genetic code, between Mayans and Anasazi. In 1990, a new science developed called anthropological genetics. A lot of independent labs starting researching our genes, our DNA, and then we realized in those early years, end of 1990s, beginning of 2000, that there are some anomalies. For example, one of them was the same haplogroup in Western Europe, Basques, in Northern Africa, Berbers, in the tribe in Amazon, South America, and Guatemala, North America. So the same haplogroup, all we needed was the place from which this haplogroup was distributed. In the center of those four continents is the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and the place where until 12,000 years ago we had a huge island or small continent. Some people call it Atlantis. And guess what? 2003, 4, 5, those independent labs started disappearing because the National Geographic, financed by Westinghouse, which was owned by the elites, Rockefeller, Rothschild, and the others, they started investing in genetic research, and people started getting their analysis for free. When I did my DNA analysis in 1990s, I had to pay $350. The National Geographic took over, it was for free. So what you do, you go where it's free. So now they are able to manipulate with those information because it was becoming a threat for them. There was a scientific tool to show that the civilization of Atlantis existed, the civilization of Lemuria existed, Motherland Moon, and the others. So it's all about the manipulation with the knowledge. Now, our project in Bosnia is all different, no manipulation. So what we are saying, we are open for everyone. We invite everyone to come to Bosnia. We offer the opportunity to people to volunteer here. So I think with those two bases that we have, free energy, pyramids and energy as energy machines, and the free flow of knowledge, that we're going to change this area first and then the whole world.
Yeah, speaking of changing the world did change of sorts on the date December 21st, 2012, which most people know was the end of the Mayan long count calendar. I'd like to discuss that for a little bit, but if you just give me a moment here, I'd like to talk about the question, the subject of what happened on the date December 21st, 2012, and I'll give you four different sources. First of all, Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis said that date was the first time in history where everybody in the world got to experience universal dream time. We were not consciously aware that it was happening, but what happened was we all, for a brief moment, when we were experiencing universal dream time, we got to experience a moment where we got to decide whether or not we are going to go on a mission to expand consciousness, or if we were going to decide to be sheeple. That's the short and long end of it. I hope that makes sense, but that's what he said. There's also the claim made by Andromeda Council contactee Tolek, who said that on that date, the galactic alignment caused massive amounts of energy to make the Earth's core blossom into a fourth dimensional core. It was the third dimensional core planet, but on that date, the energy caused the core to blossom into a 4D core, and over the course of time, the Earth will ascend, so to speak, into a fourth dimensional planet, and so will humanity. It has been also said by Jim Self, who I'm going to have on my show in the not-too-distant future, that was the date that signaled when we are all free. What he meant by that was, it doesn't matter what you do after the date December 21st, 2012. The timeline is set, and the end result of that timeline, no matter what the events happen on that timeline, the end result will be the same no matter what you do. So in that sense, you are free in that your actions will not change the end result of the timeline. And there's also the idea of what kind of galactic alignment do we have. Well, most people would say the Earth, the Sun, and the center of the Milky Way galaxy all align. But in reality, that's a conception. You're talking about the wrong galactic alignment there. The real galactic alignment that people should have been talking about, and by the way, Santos Bonacci, astrologer par excellence, did talk about this in one of his presentations, which is on his Mr. Astrotheology channel. He explained that every 15,000 years is a great cross that happens. In the sky, we have a cross that does not move. One arm of the cross is the galaxy, the arm of the galaxy that goes through the center of the galaxy, and the other part of that cross is the celestial equator. That's one cross. There is another cross that's not on the sky, but is on the ground. And here on the ground of the Earth, we have a cross formed by the angles of the equinoxes and the solstices. It's kind of hard to describe this, but let me quickly try to explain this. Picture the Earth in outer space. Picture like the top point of the winter solstice or the summer solstice, and draw a line from where the maximum part is the solstice down to where the minimum part is on the winter solstice, and then draw another line that connects the opposite ends of the equinoxes. I know it's hard to explain, but I'm trying to do my best here. And that's a cross that we have on the ground, and that's known as the mundane cross. And every 13,000 years, the celestial cross and mundane cross will align and form like an 8-spoked cross. And some people say that the 8-spoked wheel that you can see in the Lost Book of Nostradamus is a representation of this 8-armed cross. And there was a documentary on the History Channel, I believe it was called The Lost Book of Nostradamus, where Vincent Bridges did talk about that the celestial cross and the mundane cross crossing with each other to form an 8-spoked wheel is the 8-spoked wheel in the Lost Book of Nostradamus, and that's the real galactic alignment that people should have been talking about in regards to that date. So now that I've given you, I've babbled long enough already, I'm sorry, but now that I've told you about that cross, that alignment, and also those 3 other things that people have said about what happened on the end of the Mayan calendar date, could you offer any comments whatsoever on any of the stuff that I've just talked about here?
Well, I think it does make a lot of sense about our solar system traveling through the galaxy, and that we are at the end of one cycle, beginning of another one. I spoke to John Major Jenkins, the guy who really influenced a lot of the stories that's been going around the last 10 years. In 1994, I guess, he wrote a book, 2012. And when I talked to him in December of 2012, it seemed like, well, he said, well, it was not really me who was saying that there was an apocalyptic event that will come in 2012, that it was the end of the Mayan calendar, and so on and so forth. But I think the astronomers could offer us some better version of what was happening exactly on that date. But what you are bringing is that it seems that a lot of people were expecting that just that particular date, December 21st, would mean that something would happen outside the universe, in the cosmos, on this planet, that will influence us, that will enable us to go from the 3rd to the 5th dimensions or something else. But I think that the real answer is us. If we go deep within, we can find all the answers, and we can start the change. The change does not come from the outside, it comes from us. And if you all ask a simple question about the purpose, obviously it is not about the materialistic things, it's not about the evolution just because of the evolution, it's about us being happy and fulfilled during this life. And I must say that I was happy before December 22nd, 2012. I was happy then, I'm happy now. And I think that if we found that inner peace, if we learn how to have balance between the material and spiritual in art, if we realize how beautiful this physical experience can be and should be, I think that would answer much more questions than really what was happening on December 22nd, 2012 to us, or what was supposed to happen. And I know some people being disappointed that nothing happened. And I think it works both ways. Inside, what's in there, stays within, but then also the effects coming from the outside.
Right, and just for the sake of having an interesting conversation here, let's talk about what the beginning of that Mayan calendar was all about. There was the date August, I believe it was August 11th, or maybe it was August 13th, 3113 BC, and Giorgio Tsoukalos on an episode of Ancient Aliens talked about how that was the date that the 9 and 13 gods descended from the sky. And that somehow symbolized the start of the Mayan long count calendar. And Giorgio Tsoukalos said, well, right there, they're talking about extraterrestrials. And some people would debate that, I'm sure. But and he said that his source for that was the Chilam Balam books, the book of the Jaguar priest that talked about that August 11th, 3113 BC was the date that those 9 and 13 gods descended from the sky. Do you have anything to say about that start date on the Mayan calendar and any of that stuff that George had said about gods descending?
There are 21 Mayan calendars. Some of them are 365 days. Some of them are 360 plus 5 days. Some of them are 240 days. Some of them are 8 days, 9 days. Some of them are 5,025 years, which you just mentioned. Some of them are even more. Some of them are 52 years, the cycle of Pleiades on the night sky. And it tells us that the Mayans were very skilled people when it comes to the astronomy, when it comes to calendars. And they had some very practical purposes for all their calendars. When you have a calendar which shows, for example, the cycles about the insects and some other cycles in nature on this planet, and then some other cycles on some other star system about our solar system, then you can start predicting stuff. You know that the solstice will come, the equinox will come, you know that certain seasons would come, and then you can use those information in your daily life. Agriculture is one of them. But then also, your personal destiny is another one. And destiny of your civilization, when to build cities and things like that. So we know from those documents that they were very knowledgeable. When it comes to the idea that 5,025 years ago, the Mayan came from the cosmos on this planet, it is possible. But again, they would need more scientific arguments. But it is very possible. But then on the other hand, we can see some elements that really do not fit that idea. For example, the Mayans would have a lot of crystal skulls. And they've been finding them, the Western civilization, mostly in the 19th century. The French, because Mexico was under the French government for some time, and even Austria-Hungary, their rulers were there. And of course, Englishmen and the Spanish. And we know that some of those crystal skulls are extremely old. There was no technology to make it at that time. And how old? It seems that over 12,000 years. And they were coming from certain other areas like Tibet, or like from Atlantis, and so on. So it seems that we can establish certain connection between the Mayan civilization and the advanced civilization before ours. We know also that according to some radiocarbon dating, we are finding seeds in Belize over 7,000 years ago, meaning that this civilization was domesticating certain cultures over 7,000 years ago. So if Giorgio thinks that it's only 5,025 years, now they need to explain this. It's possible to explain it, like I said, we have semi-gods, the real Mayans, the cosmic travelers, but then we need proofs for that hypothesis.
Okay, one question I'd like to ask you about that Mayan ball game that they often play, in which they would try to get a ball through a circle that's up in the air on a ball court. Some people have asserted that the ball going through that circle is supposed to represent the sun going through the center of the galaxy, but well, I guess you could give your take on that. But what I really wanted to ask you is, there seems to be a little debate over what happened to the winner or the loser of this game. People would often say that the people who lost that ball game were the ones who got sacrificed and were killed and were sacrificed. But some people asserted, no, that's a complete and total misconception. The people that won the game, they were actually the ones that were killed and sacrificed, because the Mayans felt that the people that were capable of winning that ball game, they're the ones who are worthy of being killed and sacrificed. And they also say, well, the Mayans, they wouldn't care if they were murdered and sacrificed, because they believe in an afterlife. They believe that if they win the game and are sacrificed, they're worthy of being sacrificed, so they don't fear being killed and sacrificed. So that at no point during the ball game when they were playing, they thought, oh my God, they're going to kill me if I win. I don't think I should play. No, the Mayans could care less, because they thought being sacrificed was a reward. So I guess my two questions for you on this in regards to that ball game: does the ball going through that circle represent the sun going through the celestial, the center of the galaxy? And also, did they sacrifice the winner or the loser of that game?
Well, what you just said is based on our mainstream archaeologists trying to explain what is shown on this mosaic in Chichen Itza. And all these stories are based on one town, Chichen Itza on Yucatan Peninsula, in the ball court, which is not a typical Mayan court because the size is huge, and on all others there are no motifs like this one, with the players and their captain keeping the human head in his hand. And I know there were stories a few decades ago that the team who would lose, they would cut his head. And now, recently, they are saying, no. It seems that the winning team, in order to please the gods, they would cut this guy's head. I don't think that playing those games were about the cutting heads. Otherwise, we would have the same motif on all the ball courts, from Monte Alban to those in Yucatan Peninsula, all over the place, Salvador, or Guatemala, or Tikal, or Copan, on all others. And it is not there. Now, since this is the most recent Chichen Itza, it is possible that they had different explanations of older ideas. You see, when the Aztecs came to Mayan lands, they heard the legend that the Mayans wanted to please the sun god, giving him his love. So what the Aztecs were doing 700-800 years ago, or even 600 years ago, they were getting their enemies on the top of their pyramids, getting the heart out of their bodies and giving it to the god, the sun. Thousands of years before them, the Mayans were talking about something different. They were talking about giving their love, the emotions, to sun, which was their father. So here we can see that the civilizations who come after don't have to be superior. In this particular case, they were much more primitive. I think it was the same case with those games, and I think that the motive that we have in Chichen Itza is a reflection of something that was happening in the past, and they probably misunderstood. And to answer your first question, what throwing the ball through that circle meant, I would say that was just the game, like we have today, game of football or soccer or basketball. But in their case, they had the opportunity that every game be watched by their rulers. But then, you have to realize that every city or every little town would have their kings, or they not have a huge kingdom. But the ruler, it was more like a mayor. He was there at every or almost every game. And yes, they did have their rituals, but I wouldn't say that it would go all the way to the idea that they would cut the heads because somebody would lose or win the game. But there is one more thing which I would like to discuss before we finish. I did mention that under the Bosnian pyramids we have a huge network of underground tunnels. I also realized that underground tunnels are under the Egyptian pyramids, the Giza Plateau, under Teotihuacan pyramids in Mexico, under Palenque, Mayan pyramids, under Chinese pyramids. They always follow the pyramids. And I think that we are finding the answers why. Again, we've been measuring different energy phenomena, and we have noticed that a lot of people who come to the Bosnian pyramid tunnels, they feel good. Deeper they go, they breathe better and better. And the oxygen level, 21%, the temperature very pleasant, humidity also. But then we notice that testimonies of the visitors, people who would have asthma, for example, once they go through the tunnels, they go outside, they don't need air pumps anymore. People with some type of allergies, they go outside the tunnel, the allergies are gone. People who would have pains in their neck or headaches, once they go through the tunnels, those pains are gone. So again, we wanted to find scientific explanation what was happening inside the Bosnian pyramid tunnels. So we measured the concentration of negative ions. As the medical science knows, negative ions are very good because they clean the atmosphere from dust, they raise the level of oxygen in our blood and our brain, and they kill viruses and bacteria. In your office, in my home, the level of negative ions is rather low, about 100 per cubic centimeter. If you go to downtowns, it's about 400, little fresher. If you go to the village, 800. If you go by the river, 1500. In Bosnia, we have a mountain called Olympic Mountain Igman. On the top of this mountain, in the forest, is the highest concentration in Bosnia, 5,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter. And guess what? In Bosnian pyramid tunnels, the concentration is between 30 and 50,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter. It seems that somebody was building an underground healing facility. And then the second element, the cosmic radiation. We live on the surface of the planet, and we're not even aware that a lot of cosmic radiation is coming every second of our life here, and some of them are harmful for our bodies. And guess what? In Bosnian pyramid tunnels, 100 feet below the ground, there are no cosmic radiations. The third element, natural radioactivity. Again, a lot of bad radioactivity coming from underground. In Bosnian pyramid tunnels, there are none. So, the moment you get to Bosnian pyramid tunnels, and now I'm inviting you to come, your body or our bodies don't have enemies anymore. Our body cells can start doing their job. What is their job? To fix the problems in our body, to start the regeneration process, to start the self-healing process. That's why people feel so good. And now, look what we have here, Andrew. You're a very knowledgeable guy, see that, very skilled about different topics. With the Bosnian Pyramid projects, unfortunately, we generated so many enemies in cultural establishment and even in alternative scene, because we actually do the research on the site year after year. Now, in the first few years, people who were against us were coming from the mainstream science, from the archaeological geological and other aspects of our science. Egyptologists also. They do not understand us. They don't understand, they attack you. But then in the future, because of the self-healing abilities that we are getting from the pyramid energy, we're going to have more powerful enemy. Now, we know that what the pharmaceutical industry does, they are selling us those pills which don't resolve the problem, they're simply giving us 10 or 15 more side effects. So now, pharmaceutical lobby will not like our project. The third one, the pyramid energy, the free energy, the wireless transportation, using resources from our planet which are renewable. Well, guess what? Oil and gas industry will not like that, the most powerful industry. And finally, with the energy beams coming from the pyramids, going to the universe, one way, and the other way, receiving the signals from the universe. We've been scientifically proving that yes, there are existing more advanced civilizations from the past, and they were from the universe. And now, intelligent community will start checking on us. So I would say that we are not for the easy ride in the future. But then, hey, this life is an interesting game, so let's enjoy it.
Let's enjoy it indeed. By the way, I'll give you about 15 minutes of showtime before we call this quits. And again, I do apologize for being late. I would have been able to end the show by now if I didn't. But I do want to ask you two more questions about the Mayan civilization. First of all, there was a stone that had some parts of it chipped off, and I believe the stone does mention the end date of December 21st, 2012, and Eric von Daniken was very adamant that the stone read that on December 21st, 2012, an entity will descend from heaven, and that entity is the god known as Bolon Yokte. And he also said that there are Mayan traditions that talk about how gods, which he believes are extraterrestrials, will return to Earth on that date. And Bolon Yokte, according to some Mayan researchers, is a misunderstood Mayan god in a few ways. They did talk about that on the one of the Mayan-specific episodes of Ancient Aliens. So, but it's kind of confusing to a lot of people. Some people are saying Eric von Daniken, he's just hypothesizing that because that specific stone he's talking about has some parts of it that are chipped off. So, do you by any chance know anything about that stone that von Daniken was talking about, which said on 12/21/2012 will descend from heaven the god Bolon Yokte? Do you know what that's all about?
Unfortunately, no, I haven't seen that episode. Now, I did meet with Daniken last year. He came to visit me here in Bosnia, but we have not discussed this. Now, I read his last book. It was mostly about Egyptian pyramids, underground tunnels, underground lakes. It was rather interesting, a lot of interesting photos, but nothing about that particular subject. But I think rather similar thing in Palenque. In 1950s, of course, they discovered the only that grave under the pyramid, the one from the Palenque's ruler, Lord Pakal. Now, on stelas in Palenque, we can see the dates, and thanks God we do know their numbers and their dates with 100%. We are 100% sure about that. And about their hieroglyphic symbols, we are about 20% sure about that. There are at least 800 of them, and only 20% of them have been deciphered. But what's been deciphered on this particular stela is that Lord Pakal lived about 80 years. Now, they found this grave, they found the bones, they found the skeletons, which have not been opened since the time the guy went in there under the pyramid. And when they did the analysis, they realized that it was not a body of an 80-year-old old man, but of 40-year-old. Now the question is, who's buried there? And there is a legend which says that after his death or after his physical life on this planet, he left this planet to be returned one day.
Okay, I suppose that's possible. Actually, before I ask you my final question, one quick question I wanted to throw out at you. There was that History Channel documentary where that researcher named Jim Turner claims that the tomb of Bakal's son, Shan Balum, is on a island that's like right in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean, and he claims that there is a monument, a Mayan monument, which shows a Mayan sun god, and there's also a statue of a jaguar on that monument. A lot of people say that this is all pseudoscientific. He really has no way of proving this, that is what the structure is. But if you by any chance know what I'm talking about here, do you think maybe there's a possibility that Bakal's Shan Balum was buried in that island that Jim Turner is talking about?
I'm not sure about that. Again, they would need independent confirmation, but personally, I don't think so.
Okay. One final thing I'll talk about here. You suggested, I'm getting this from Wikipedia here on the part which talks about your PhD thesis. It says that you suggest that the Maya had contact with the Chinese on the basis of what you say is nephrite, which is found in China, not in South America in a jaguar statue, though others identify the material as jadeite, or whatever that word is pronounced. I guess in the final 10 minutes, you got 10 minutes to talk about this if you want. Could you please elaborate on the evidence, this and other things which show that the Mayans and the Chinese had contact with each other?
There is a long history of communication between different continents. The leading theory is that people came to North and then South America from Eastern Asia, from Siberia, and through the Bering Strait. And of course, I disagree with that. Again, if we invite science in the help, we know that in 1990s, DNA analysis has proven that there is the same haplogroup in Southern Asia, Indian subcontinent, and then from China, from Indonesia, and in Ecuador and Peru. So there was a direct communication by sea between Asia and North and South America. In Mesoamerica, where the Mayas were located, more than 10% of people are of Chinese origin. It goes back for thousands and thousands of years. There is a certain percentage of people of Mexican soil coming directly from Africa. Of course, we know about Olmecs and Olmec heads, which showed people from Ethiopia. They call them kings. And you can clearly see that they are black, with big lips, big noses, and we know that anatomically they are from Ethiopia, blacks from Ethiopia. That's another question. How come we have 4,000 years ago civilization with the kings from Africa? When it comes to Maya, yes, I did mention that the jade, the material that they've been using a lot, was coming from China. But not only that material, a lot of other artifacts are showing Chinese faces. The Mayans is one of them, but also Zapotecs and some other on Mexican soil. So what they've been telling us is, of course, nonsense. That only with Christopher Columbus in the end of the 16th century, the communication between Europe and Mesoamerica started. Communication was there not thousands, but tens of thousands of years ago. And it is shame how little we know about the history of this planet and how much the information has been suppressed about our own race, about humanity. It's a shame that the organizations like Smithsonian Institutes and the museums were established over 120 years ago, with the goal to hide information, artifacts, skeletons of 13 feet from us, how they were established, to completely destroy all the proofs of the former civilizations, how they were destroying the mounds and everything they were finding in there, how they were hiding 99% of the artifacts they were finding there. So it seems their sole purpose was not to show stuff to us, but to hide them from us. Why? Because the elites are below all this, behind all these acts. Why? To keep us manipulated. Less we know, easier to manipulate us. And I think it has to be changed. And the projects like Bosnian Pyramid Project, which have no place for elites, is the way to go. And we as citizens, we need to insist that every other project that deals with the distant past and has some mysteries, has to become public, and independent researchers have to go there and check on everything they claim. And I think it's high time to start with this nonsense, then trying to fit everything in the last couple of thousand years, because our history is much longer. We are not babies anymore as a civilization. Places like Bosnian pyramids, like Göbekli Tepe in eastern Turkey, Yonaguni Monument at the bottom of the Pacific floor, Baalbek in eastern Lebanon, huge blocks of 1,200 tons, and of course the new dating of pyramids in Egypt, Mexico, China, will require that the whole set of history books be rewritten.
Yes, I do hope we rewrite it. By the way, since you didn't take 10 minutes there, I guess I could throw one more question at you, and you got 5 minutes to cover this one before we call it a night. You did talk about how the Bosnian pyramids you believe are man-made. Well, I can certainly believe that. However, as Eric von Daniken says, they were all the structures of antiquity. They were made by humans, but with the assistance and the technology of extraterrestrial entities. Now, if you don't want to really go too far into the subject of extraterrestrials, or if you do, great, but if you don't, I would really respect that. But hey, I think at the very least, there is definitely no question that they were not made outright by some sort of extraterrestrial, or more specifically, a higher dimension of consciousness entity, which some might call extraterrestrial. Regardless of whatever you call it, it has been asserted by many that some higher consciousness force, entity, ET, whatever you want to call it, had to assist humanity in creating the Bosnian pyramids in terms of technology and knowledge and everything else. So are you willing to come out and acknowledge, yes, they were man-made, but with the assistance of some sort of extraterrestrial or higher dimensional entity?
Actually, what I say is that the Bosnian pyramids are artificial structures made by more advanced civilizations. So I don't really mention man-made. What I'm saying, yes, we do have intelligent beings. Now, when you see that somebody was able to make concrete blocks more advanced, more superior than what we have today, of course, we have intelligence behind that. When you see that somebody was laying out those structures, making triangles, triangle within triangles, sacred geometry, of course, they knew secrets of geometry. When you see that they knew how to get proper frequencies, 7.83, 28 kilohertz, and so on and so forth, so they knew how to manipulate with the energies and the frequencies, the power of natural resources. There are 3 ley lines in Visoko, in the heart of Bosnia, the pyramid being the most powerful geometrical shape. So they were not primitive cavemen. They were not what our science mentioned as Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon. So the question is whether the more advanced civilizations had the need to use primitive cavemen from those times. Now, to think that we are the only civilization in the universe is nonsense. Of course, there are so many more, and so many more are more advanced than us. And there are so many civilizations in different dimensions. Some of them are in our visible spectrum. But then what we can see is such a small, very limited range. There are many more that we cannot see, many more dimensions. We use terms like extraterrestrials, but then there are inner terrestrials, and they are probably on our planet much longer than we are. So I think we have to be humble, we have to research, investigate, and we have to be truthful. By that, we're going to save our dignity. We need to show our willingness to stay open and to learn more.
Well said, and of course it goes without saying that one reason people refuse to believe in aliens is because they find the idea of aliens on Earth to be too frightening, and that of course goes back to what you said earlier about how we are in a society that's in many ways based on fear. But I hope to change that, and I have no doubt that's going to change because we are in a positive timeline. But, Semir, we have come to the end of this show, and again, I got to apologize to you once again that I do apologize for being 26 minutes late or whatever, but believe me, I will learn from this mistake and make sure that if I ever schedule a show outside of my normal airtime of 6 to 8 p.m., I will definitely learn from what happened today and make sure I never make the same mistake twice. That you have my word on that one. But with that being said, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I tell all of my guests. Semir, you are indeed a fascinating individual, and I have no doubt that I could have you on the show another time to talk about other things. But with that being said, one of my goals with this radio show is to get as many different guests on my show as possible before I start giving any one specific guest double dips, as I feel that that is the fairest, most impartial, and ultimately the most informative way of doing a radio show. So that does mean, I regret to say, I will probably not be asking you to come on my show again, but understand that's only because I need to give thousands of other fascinating individuals a chance at some glory on my show. But like I said, it was a pleasure having you on. This was filled with great information, and I promise you I will do everything I can to spread this show far and wide using Facebook and other mediums. And since I mentioned that, I'm going to be able to post on Facebook on group pages again on Friday. The Facebook Nazis have censored me off Facebook again, but that ban is supposed to end on Friday, so I will make sure that I take that time to spread this show and all the other shows that I haven't been able to spread like wildfire. So, Semir, it was a pleasure having you on. I wish you the best of luck with your research, and I'm very glad that Marta Thomas, I believe her name was able to get you on my show, because you were a fascinating guest, and it was a pleasure having you on.
I enjoyed the talk. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Good luck to you, too. Take care now. Later.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye. Folks, that is the end of this show. Next week, we will be having Peter Slattery on. I did have him as a guest on that roundtable discussion that I did with Elizabeth Diamond Mulligan not that long ago. So we're going to be talking probably not about any of the stuff that we talked about in that conversation, but some other things that I didn't discuss in that conversation about ET contacts and stuff. He is an ET contactee. He's from down under, by the way, from Australia. So, and I promise not to be late for that show like I was late for this show. But I'll learn from my mistake. So without further ado, folks, namaste. Take care. This is Andrew Fisher signing off. Enjoy the rest of your trek throughout consciousness.